Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and start. Good evening, everyone. My name is Janet Forrest. I am one of the adult program coordinators at the Nantucket Atheneum. Also in the background is helping me with the Q&A is Daniel Griffin, also an adult program coordinator. And I welcome you to ask questions. If you have questions, you can go ahead and put that in the Q&A box. You'll see the button at the bottom of your screen. If you have comments or thoughts, you can also put it in chat. And if you are joining us on YouTube, you can put your questions or chat in the live chat, and we'll be looking for that, and we can go ahead and answer those questions as well. This is a conversation, so feel free to put your questions in anytime. You don't have to wait till the end. We're going to be showing some clips, and without any further ado, I'm going to welcome our guest. Tonight, we are speaking to Andrew Buckley, who is an Emmy-nominated producer based in Cape Cod. He is also the founder and host of Hit and Run History, which is a film crew gathered from coastal towns of New England that takes history out of the library and down to the street level. So welcome, Andrew. Thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you. This is. I was really looking forward to this for quite some time, and I'm so thankful that anything, frankly, can happen these days that allows me to bring our projects to the public, which we've been sorely missing over these past few months. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. We appreciate your flexibility. Just briefly, tell us a little bit about your background before you got to Hit and Run.
I was a political science major, of all things, which always is a great way to rack up student debt and not make a lot of money. And after I got a taste of that, I decided that I needed to use my skills for something else. And so I actually, I've been doing a lot of legal and government research and working in electoral politics. And so I turned those skills to actually doing research for several different law firms in Boston, doing research and investigations, going to law libraries, going to probate courts, going to registries of deeds, and then I got good at finding, doing a lot of genealogy work and all the rest. And so I got good at finding dead people and finding things that dead people had left and nobody knew about. So, so that, that ties in with a lot of history. I wrote quite a while ago a historical novel that followed the story of the Columbia expedition, the first American voyage around the world, in 1787. And so after I had done all my research for that book, I realized there were only a handful of people in the world who were really experts at it. And I had unintentionally become one of them. And so, which was great. It was a very small group of people about an obscure topic. But that was fun. And then I had a daughter, got married and all the rest. And so about 10 years afterwards, I decided it was time to pick that story up again. But I always had a hard time selling the idea to literary agents and publishers and editors, because they said, well, this is a really great story. How come I don't know about it? Is it true? Well, okay. So I realized I had to educate them. And that's when YouTube was starting to explode. And I realized what we could do. I just basically asked a friend of mine if he would be my assistant director on this. We went to the local access channel, Cape Cod Community Television, borrowed some cameras, had no idea what we're doing. And we just went around starting to make what I thought was going to be a book trailer. But we got too good at it. We got some grants, and we ended up making a pilot about the prelude to the voyage and all the background on what started it off. And so because of that, then WGBH got interested after we took the story across to Cape Verde, which was their first stop. And we're just basically following the story as an adventure travel show rather than a dry documentary. And so we thought that would get people interested. And so we were a victim of our own success on doing that at the right time. Got on WGBH's history site and then went down to the Falkland Islands, took my producer from WGBH down there, got stuck down in the Falkland Islands for an extra week. She still talks to me. So that producer is still a friend. even though I got us stuck for longer than we anticipated with the whole film crew. And one of those episodes got nominated for an Emmy, and so which was great. And so then we also were able to get some of our short pieces up on Rhode Island PBS. They were using them interstitially, which means, when Masterpiece Theater, or whatever it is, plays on a Saturday night, and it goes up until about 8:52 p.m. Well, you got to fill that time with something. You can't fill it with commercials. So they were using us as filler. So we were producing shorts that could be either all together as one big piece, or they could be broken up into what somebody called snackable history. And that was great, because rather than having one film show one time every couple months, ours were scattered throughout the week at almost like commercials. And so we were getting all sorts of play with that. And so then, because it's following the voyage of the first American voyage around the world, following that story is a logistical challenge, and financially, we saw that the 400th anniversary of the Mayflower was going to be coming up, Mayflower arrival. And I had a family connection to there, and we decided that we were going to jump on that story. And so that's what has brought us to this current documentary that we've premiering now, Stephano, The True Story of Shakespeare Shipwreck. So maybe I'm getting ahead of myself.
So is all that under the umbrella, like, how did Hit and Run history start? Is that all under the umbrella of Hit and Run history?
All of it, yeah. It's basically our approach, because we were looking and saying, we need something that's less Ken Burns, more Anthony Bourdain. And we were also looking and seeing that there was lots of content coming out, especially with YouTube. But we realized that the competition for eyeballs with television was not another TV show. It was a video of cute kitten can't turn over, sort of thing. So we needed to grab people, especially young people, early, because if they're interested in history early, then you got them. Mm-hmm. You got them for their entire life. And oftentimes when we would do screenings, we would have a lot of older people come in, a lot of educators, especially the high school teachers loved us. They kept on saying the same thing. We had an accessible approach, because our approach was not some off-camera narrator talking to a historian with a bunch of books behind them. I said, if we ever do that, we failed. We've only done it once. But we wanted to be able to walk and talk with the people. We had to show movement, go to the places where history happened, go to the experts, have a conversation as we're doing something, whether it's having a cup of coffee, going to a deli, or walking along shore or something like that. But also having a conversation between us and the crew. So it wasn't just me as the host, but the people in my crew, a lot of them are history geeks themselves. Mm-hmm. And so they would have questions. And so there would be there was no fourth wall. Yeah. It's all, so the approach made the audience feel like they were along for the ride. So
let's show a clip. We had put together. So which clip can we show people to give them?
Well, to give them the best sense, and this trailer is from a few years ago, but I think it still works to show our approach. I think in the playlist that we have, it's the first one, the series trailer.
Okay, great. So just give me a second. I'm going to share my screen. There we go. And we'll play.
If this rock cracks off and I fall in, get it.
Get it. Just roll.
I'm Andrew Buckley, gumshoe historian. I've been an investigator, writer, photographer, politician, and clam digger. The past isn't dead, it's all around us, found in regular, everyday places. You just need to know where to look. With a crew gathered from coastal towns in New England, we take history out of the archives and down to the street level. We check out the players, the places they lived, and hear from the people who know them best. We get dirty, we make mistakes, and we have fun. We're practicing history without a license. Hit and run.
We're taking a video camera into a courthouse.
The government gave them the right to be a pirate.
He wanted to emulate James Cook.
Pulls out his sword.
First, American ship to circum navigate the globe.
We're on the trail of the Columbia expedition. This is not just a history show. This is an adventure, and you're along for the ride. No! This is how we encounter history.
Get out of my way. I'm a historian.
What happened to you? Hate and run history happened to me.
We'll be home soon.
The following was made possible through the generous support of
Sorry.
Long Airlines.
There you go.
That's the problem with those playlists. They love to.
I know, they just go right along.
Yeah, so that gives you a bit of a flavor of how we are. We're quite irreverent. We just like to be able to, have everybody in the crew join in the conversation, and even if the member of the crew isn't really familiar with the story at the beginning, they become quite partisan, at the end.
So tell us about. So let's talk about where the most recent film, Stephano. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, actually, this is a story that I grew up with. Of a man who had been a member of my family, who had been on the Mayflower, who had been the only passenger aboard the Mayflower who had been to the New World before, and that he had gotten into trouble on his way to Jamestown a decade earlier, and was supposedly some sort of trouble in a shipwreck or something like that, but somehow he survived, and then he ended up back in England again, and then he's on the Mayflower, and according to the stories in my family, that he was the person, whenever a Native American came to Plymouth, they stayed at his house, and eventually the family, as soon as they could, moved out of Plymouth and tried to come down to the Cape. Moving down to Yarmouth and eventually Orleans, Eastham, and that area. So that he was not somebody who was there for religious reasons as much as he was kind of, well, you call him, I don't know, a bit of a libertarian, but more importantly, a person who just was like, I just got to get away from these people, which probably I think a lot of us could agree with if we were put in the same situations, surrounded by Puritans and separatists and Anglicans and whatever else. It's just got to get away from me. So that's the story I grew up with, and that the story, part of the story of him getting wrecked on Bermuda, was picked up and used in the Shakespeare's final solo play, The Tempest, which I didn't know a lot about that, and so I'd never followed Shakespeare so much, but we decided to pick up this story. I mentioned it to someone I knew who had worked on one of our grants with Mass Humanities. They said, that's a good idea, just what you told me. Can you put it into a grant proposal? So we wrote it up. We're asked to formally submit a grant proposal for a pre-production grant, and we got it from Mass Humanities. So that gave us some seed money to go around, and we're supposed to produce a 3-minute trailer. Well, we produced a 17-minute trailer, which was, and got lots of information. We ended up just driving all around, driving down to Virginia, driving down to the Folger Shakespeare Library in DC, the American Shakespeare Center, and Blackfriars Theater in Stanton, Virginia. Of course, we went to Plymouth Plantation, did interviews there. And a lot of the upshot of that was we also interviewed Paula Peters from the Wampanoag tribe. And she introduced us to a young man who had played Squanto in her 1614 story about Squanto being kidnapped by the English and nearly sold into slavery. So as we were putting our story together, we got a member of the crew, a new addition to the crew, Chris Wessling, who's a member of the Wampanoag tribe who had portrayed Squanto. And we decided to wrap those stories together because what we were realizing is that while Stephen Hopkins was on Bermuda, shipwrecked, and in Jamestown, essentially under martial law there, Squanto was in England, and he was trying to get back the other way. And so the thing is, their paths are crossing. So you've got this English guy in North America, and you've got the Native Americans like Squanto in England, and eventually they do meet up in the spring of 1621, and it starts. We realize that it's not just like you had Columbus, the Mayflower, nothing in between, and boom, suddenly Native Americans in New England are saying, oh, look, an English guy, what's that all about? When actually many of them were informed. In fact, there were at a point, there were probably more Native Americans in England than there were English living in North America. So it shows us that there was a lot more going on across the Atlantic in both directions as far as cultural exchange is concerned.
Yeah. Do we have a clip of the trailer for that? Can we show that?
Sure. I believe that's further down our playlist.
Or is there a clip you'd like to show from Stephano?
Let's see. I would say play the trailer first. The 1 minute.
Got it. Okay.
Scroll down that list there.
Okay, here it goes. Let's see if I can do this.
He came very close to being strung up, and it is only because the people spoke out on his behalf that he survived.
Upon this river dwelleth Massasoit. It cometh into the sea at the Narragansett Bay where the Frenchmen so much use.
A dreadful storm and hideous began to blow from out the northeast.
Topsail, shout to the master's whistle, blow till thou burst thy wing, they're blowing up.
Pretty much the first Wampanoag that ever walked over these walls. No, I'm just kidding. It's been about 400 years though.
You definitely want to pause that. Yeah, so I'm sorry.
Well, I had a couple of questions. So it's interesting looking at your crew having so much fun, and you said they love to geek out just as much as you do. And I'm just curious, like, what goes into picking your crew and what makes a good crew member for you?
Well, you're reminding me of something. I'll back up a little bit from that first, which is about 8 years ago, 8 to 10 years ago, I had been on the board of selectmen in Chatham about 20 years ago. And a member of the board that was getting to retire asked me, why don't you come back and get involved in either be selectman or run for some other office again? To which I said, I'm having too much fun. And he said, I know. Very, very jealously that I was off having fun, and he had to do the hard work of local government. So be that as it may, yes, that's the whole point, is that we not only are we having fun, but we need to be shown having fun, because oftentimes what we're doing is we're not following, in this particular case, we're not following the story of Stephen Hopkins. The show follows the story of us following the story of Stephen Hopkins. And so that brings in people who might not be interested in history or might not be interested in Shakespeare, but they're certainly interested in watching us going and getting into trouble, and travel and eat and whatever else. so as far as crew members are concerned, I mean, I lucked out very much with Matthew Griffin, who was my assistant director originally. And again, we had no idea what we were doing when we first started up. And our rule was, I said, just leave the camera on. Just leave it on and we'll edit out, because it's better than trying to figure out what shot we need. Because if we're doing an interview, I don't know. I don't know what we're doing. So that meant that we ended up with tons and tons and tons of footage. And we would take 2 to 3 to 4 times as long to edit things down to something sensible. But as far as typically our crew looks like this, it's 2 videographers, myself as the host, a sound person, really important, and usually a 5th member of the crew as a still photographer, because those stills we realized were absolutely essential. And it's usually, if nothing else, the person I might be having a conversation with them, or if I'm interviewing somebody, the videographers are not going to think about what a good production still is. So a 5-member crew was perfect. And so we've swapped out different people. Sometimes we've had to have a smaller crew. I don't think we've ever had a bigger crew. But it's usually somebody who is going along for the ride. So, if I say, hey, we're going to be going to Cape Verde for a week, do you want to come? Usually it's just the idea of, hi, this is great. I can participate in this particular thing, or go down to the Falkland Islands, or go take a cruise around Cape Horn, or go to Bermuda, or go to England. It wasn't hard for me to convince Jamie Horton, who was the training manager at the Cape Cod Community Media Center, and who has been in God knows how many Shakespeare productions. Jamie, would you like to go? We're going to try to film at the Globe Theater. We're going to go film in the location where The Tempest was first performed for King James. We're going to go to Plymouth, England on Thanksgiving, for the American Thanksgiving. And by the way, we're going to be bringing along Chris Wessling, a Native American, to be in England on the American Thanksgiving and to participate, as it turned out, in there and walk with the Lord Mayor down the street for the American Thanksgiving. I mean, that's just, these are once in a lifetime opportunities. And so it's not hard to recruit a crew as much as it is, it's just trying to figure out who can get the time off or get the permission to do that. So so we really want to go exactly where history took place. And then I would turn around and say to some like Jamie, here is the firsthand account of the shipwreck of the Sea Venture, this flagship of this fleet that was going to Jamestown to relieve them because they were starving. It wrecks on Bermuda, and a guy on board who's writing an account was a business partner and colleague of William Shakespeare's. So he writes this magnificent account of this storm and the wreck, an account of Stephen Hopkins getting into trouble for speaking out against the authorities that saying, hey, we should build a ship and go to Virginia, which didn't make a lot of sense to him because in Bermuda, they had everything. It was a tropical paradise, and they knew in Jamestown, people were starving. So why would you want to go there? So we have this account, and I say to Jamie, let's go sit on the beach, and you can read the firsthand account, the beach where they came, the shipwreck survivors came ashore. So we filmed that. So these are real once in a lifetime opportunities to put places that you wouldn't think about, put places into context. Mm-hmm. That really attracts a lot of people who might not be interested in history, but they're interested in something like that.
Yeah. I mean, you kind of already answered this, but I mean, as we're learning, there is so much you can do virtually. There's so much you can do online by phone calls and connecting. And as I said, you've answered some of this, but like, what do you see as the value of packing up a film crew and actually going to a location and having boots on the ground? What's the value added?
People love travel. They lots of people. I mean, people go to Gettysburg, mm-hmm. not just to remember the sacrifices of all those Union soldiers. They go there because they want to see what it might feel like to have been there. You go on July 3rd and imagine yourself in a wool uniform, running up a hillside and you can imagine, you can really understand that better. And so people want to see that. If they can't go there and do that, they'd love to be able to see what it was really like, because there are many books that can be written about something, but history-based travel is really helpful. The other thing that we do as well is we'd like to use, as much as we can, local music as the background. So a lot of times we use small local independent bands to be able to have that. We like to be able to use as I said, the original sources and read from them, so that it's not just me paraphrasing something. But it's just the fact that you're watching us get into trouble, eat, possibly get drunk, and get and always get out of trouble in one way or another. So it may just be that, but the thing is, in a way, it helps you identify with what was going on in that story. Because while we're not sailing around the world like the Columbia expedition, we are going around the world, and if we run into trouble, just imagine what it was like 200 years ago. And same thing with Stephen Hopkins. If we're having trouble getting to the airplane to get off Bermuda, or we're having trouble on icy roads in Virginia, then God knows what it was like 400 years ago when there was no AAA to call. There was just no help whatsoever. So it makes you appreciate, if what the challenges were for people back then.
Let's show another clip from Stephano, and then I want to ask you about how you adapted this summer.
Sure.
Let's show one more clip.
Sure. Let me just see which one. I would say, I think it would be interesting because let me set this up first. And that is, it's just a 1 minute clip, the part 2A, 03 Namasket. One of the things we wanted to do was to recreate a walk that happened in the spring of 1621, right after the Mayflower had returned to England. Governor Carver had died, and William Bradford came in to be the new governor. They had already made, a couple weeks before, a treaty with Massasoit, and so they were wanting to reaffirm that. And so Stephen Hopkins, Edward Winslow, and Squanto took off on a 50-mile journey to visit, to basically just 3 people, and that's it, to go through completely unknown country to find Massasoit's village and make sure that are we still, that treaty that we made before the Mayflower left and when we had a different governor, it's still working, right? And so it was a pretty brave thing to do, to go just 3 guys, well, 2 English and 1 native as their guide to be able to go. And so we recreated that walk. We started in Plymouth right at the Mayflower too. And we walked over a period of 2 days, that entire trip. And so, and in the meantime, we had a Shakespearean actor come in, and he read an account of it. So that's the clip that we play right now as we came through Middleborough on our way to Taunton.
Okay, great. So here it comes.
After this, Tisquantum told us we should hardly in one day reach Pokanocket, moving us to go some 8 miles further, where we should find more store and better victuals. Being willing to hasten our journey, we went, and came thither at sun setting, where we found many of the Namascheks, they so calling the men of Namasket, fishing upon a weir. These welcomed us also, and gave us of their fish, and we of them our victuals. There we lodged in the open fields, for houses had they none. The ground is very good on both sides, it being for the most part cleared. Thousands of men have lived there, which died in a great plague not long since. And pity it was, and is, to see so many good fields, and so well seated, without men to dress them.
So, yeah, what we did there is we felt like rather than just telling a story of Stephen Hopkins was born here in England, Stephen Hopkins went to Bermuda, and Stephen Hopkins went to Virginia and back again, we intersperse our walk, retracing those steps. It's almost like a flash forward, and in different places along the way. And so, and that was Chris Wessling, who had portrayed Squanto a couple of years before. So, here we are walking along, retracing the steps, and it helped that Neil McGarry was able to get into the studio and read those clips, and it just added so much more depth, because by the time we reach Rhode Island and the site of the Massasoit Springs, it's known, in Warren, Rhode Island, we've already brought the whole audience from England to Bermuda and through to Virginia, so that you're starting to understand that maybe Stephen Hopkins had some sort of special skills that he picked up all along the way, and that's why he was chosen to make this trip along with Edward Winslow and Squanto. You're about halfway through the entire story when you realize, oh, this is who he is, and that's when the story of The Tempest comes in, which we then intersperse different parts of The Tempest in there until we come up to the very end of the film, which is an hour and a half long.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. So the film is an hour and a half, which was a bit much for us to do through Zoom.
Oh yeah.
So we chose to adapt this program. Hopefully, at some point in the future, we'll have you back for the full feature. But you were able to adapt, you and your team, to show the full film this summer. And tell us a little bit about what you've done over on the Cape this summer to get your film out there for people.
Yeah, well, last October, we had applied for quite a number of cultural council grants from different communities around Eastern Massachusetts. We've had good success in the past, and this year we did really well. And we were awarded 21 different cultural council grants. And what that requires is for us to do a screening, a local screening, and do a Q&A with the community. And so normally it's just, I show up, I have a memory stick, we stick it into a projector, watch the movie, and then I do a 20-minute Q&A. And that's great to be in a room with people and answer the questions as they arise. Clearly, we did that in one in January, one in February, and then everything blew up. And so we couldn't, since we couldn't do that, we had a choice to make, which was either forget about doing those screenings and take this to local broadcast, possibly with Rhode Island PBS, and then onwards from there, or we could try to figure out a way to be able to do events and be able to basically recover our costs by getting the grants, because we don't get the grant until we do the screening, until we do the event. And so in some places we're signing up. They've asked us to do online screenings, and that's great. Or something like this, which is a discussion about it, which is great. However, we started looking around, and a friend of mine from high school was the lighting director for the Alabama Shakespeare Company, and I had been wondering about what it would take to do a pop-up drive. And he said, I've been asked to go and look at a particular company. Do you want me to take a look for you as well? So he had some ideas. He sent me a link. I priced out what it would cost for a screen stand kit, basically, a projector, and the very important FM broadcast unit, which sends it out to people's FM radios, because otherwise you're talking about giant speakers, and you're talking about angry neighbors who don't suddenly have this thing in their backyard. And so we realized what it would take, and so we last Tuesday at the Cape Cod Community Media Center, our headquarters, we held a pop-up drive-in. We had 25 cars show up, which is maximum that we felt we could handle at that time. And the strangest thing happened is we had no technical glitches whatsoever on our premiere, which I was expecting something. And so everything worked out great. The only thing is that at that particular time, the sun was setting at like 8:03, which means we couldn't start until 8:15. But as the year goes on, it becomes easier to do it earlier and earlier. But everybody was able to hear it. I was able to plug a microphone into the FM unit. And the next thing you know, people were in their cars, safe and sound, in their cars with the air conditioning running or whatever else. And I could talk to them and say, okay, we're going to start in 5 minutes. And it was great. I mean, we were able to do that. And after an hour and a half, that was it. We had cars spaced out nicely, and it was perfect. And so we are going to continue to do that, offer that to communities so we can fulfill our grant obligations. And at the same time, if it's just not possible, then we're looking to do, online events like this and some screenings as well. And that way. So it allows us to do that. But the most important thing is once we do the screenings for our grants here in New England, there's no reason why we can't take that on the road. And we've always followed the idea of rather than a TV show to be able to make our money back and to fund future episodes, rather to follow a band model where you basically give your content away for free online or wherever, but you make your money by touring. And so we're looking to schedule tours, because all of the events that were scheduled this year for the Plymouth 400, clearly most of them are not happening, but we can. We are now available to do that. And so it puts us in a really great position. So it cost us about $1,400 for this entire thing. But, that's after a few screenings, we've paid for that. And then we've had people actually asking us if they could rent our equipment. I'm like, a little protective, but the thing is, it gives us the flexibility to be able to do things. So we're going to be doing one next week in East Harwich. The Chatham Historical Society and the Harwich Historical Society are joining together. So we're having one in East Harwich, and East Ham wants us to do one on the Windmill Green sometime later in the month, and so forth and so on. And the great thing is that because, as you guys know from your experiences there, it really doesn't matter what you put up on that screen. It's a thing. And there's so few things that people can go to these days. I mean, I could have run cartoons and people would have been happy. But in this particular case, it's a fun thing to be able to do. And we can do a Q&A as well, in one way or another through the technology available.
Yeah, well, and I feel like if any film crew were set up to adapt and be agile, it's yours.
Yes, and never say die.
I'm going to go ahead and remind everyone, if you have any questions for Andrew, go ahead and put them in the Q&A. If you're on YouTube, you can put them in the live chat, or if you just have comments, you can put that in chat. I had a question that I forgot, but I wrote down. All right. So you had mentioned how when you started, it was sort of this scrappy crew. It's like you don't have a film background. You kind of went to the public access and got some cameras. And having, gone literally around the world a couple times, what are you better at now that you weren't so good at before?
Well, I should say that as we went along, we attracted people with actual film skills. People, they actually, you do something enough and eventually people will attract. So the thing is, our sound engineer and production manager, Jay Sheehan, is an audio engineer. And Jeff Bassett, our videographer, he went to film school. So he is that. And I learned editing from Alex Schwatner, who also went to film school, because in the middle of one of our episodes, he took a vacation to Mexico and we were on a two-week deadline. And so basically he just had to show me how to use it. And unfortunately, if you get good enough at something, you do it more than you want to. So I actually did a lot of the editing myself. I think the thing that we've learned mostly is, first of all, don't leave the camera on, which we had as our rule. but at the same time, I would say to people, I want to be able to have I don't want to have lighting necessarily. I want to use natural light as much as possible, but I like the idea that if we're talking to somebody in doing an interview, a 2-camera interview, and something, like a truck crashes into another car or something like that out on the street, is like, no. I want the camera to go that way. I don't want it to ignore the thing that's happening. I want them to see what's happening, because that's a thing that happened. It's atmosphere. It's a real thing. I want to get our reaction shots. Maybe somebody makes a joke. I don't know. But it's just, we want to be able to get people fully immersed in the environment. So the idea is, we've learned, I've learned to ask better questions. I've certainly told my crew many times, it's like, if you have anything you want to say, do not wait for me to even invite you to say something. So you are to participate, and do not try to not get the other camera in the shot. It's perfectly fine. We're not trying to act like this is peeking over someone's shoulder. No, you're a member. You feel like you're a member of the crew. It's not. This is not some omniscient, God looking down from above on this conversation. We want to feel like we're part of it. So, that's it. And the only thing is that clearly, as over the past 10 years, technology has gotten better. So cameras get better, image stabilization gets better. We've gotten better at capturing sound. And the only problem is that we have so many good interviews right now that Stephano could have been 4 hours long and still been solid gold, but we didn't want to scare people off with that long a mini series. But
Shakespearean length movie.
we have an interview with Bernard Cornwell, who was playing Prospero in a version of The Tempest that was being done here in Chatham, and we interviewed him. It's 26 minutes long, me and him talking about Stephen Hopkins and The Tempest, and it's pure gold. And I said, I could just do that and walk away and not have to worry. I wouldn't have to edit. I wouldn't have to do anything. I could have just called it that and called it a day. As it is, we sprinkle it throughout the second part of our stuff. But it's just the thing is trying to figure out what to lose, since we get a lot of good stuff.
Yeah. We have a question from Susan. Do you begin to meet other historical people, other people that are related to historical figures? Sort of makes time collapse into one historical show. There are all sorts of connections geographically that you might run into.
Yeah, we try to, again, the hard thing is try to figure out not what to include. But, for example, when Stephen Hopkins returned from Virginia to England, because his wife had died and his children were orphaned, so he left there. He was probably on board the same vessel that Pocahontas was on. So you've got, and in fact, because he was an assistant to the minister in Jamestown, it's very possible he helped officiate at her wedding. And so she was in London when he actually was in London, and it's very possible that he was in London when she died, right before on her way back. So the question is, who came to her funeral? Because not only was he in England at the time, or London at the time, but so was Squanto. So I was like, wait a minute, who was at this funeral of Pocahontas? And okay, that's an interesting story, but again, that's something we have to leave behind. But at the same time, we did go to the church where she was buried, because it was important to be able to talk about her experience as a Virginia native versus Squanto's story as a Wampanoag, New England native, and at the same time. So it's what don't you include?
Yeah.
Really.
Does anyone have any questions or comments? What about you, Daniel? Anything to say or add? Okay. Is there another clip you want to take us out with? Should we show one more clip before we head out?
Actually, yeah. I'm noticing things are a little jaggedy with the streaming, and that's just the nature of things. But I was probably going to say the one with the Stephano 6 Stanton. We were very lucky because basically we looked around and said, hey, where is The Tempest being performed right now? Can we go talk to people who are playing these characters? Because if Stephen Hopkins' character is recreated into this drunken clown called Stephano in The Tempest, we'd love to be able to talk to the character who plays him, and also the character who plays opposite him, the native of the island, Caliban. And so we went to the American Shakespeare Center, was doing The Tempest, and we said, oh, great, can we interview the actors? And so we were able to do that. And again, we brought Chris Wessling down, who was getting more and more information about Stephen Hopkins, but he had never seen The Tempest before. And so these are the interviews that we had with the two actors.
Okay. Here we go, stand by. 2, and this one.
This is beautiful. Never seen anything like this.
I'm John Harrell. I'm an actor at the American Shakespeare Center, and I'm playing Stephano in the production of The Tempest.
Patrick Midgley.
And your role?
Caliban.
But they instantly start calling him the monster.
From Caliban's point of view, the first time I meet those two figures, those two clowns that you're referring to, Stephano and Trinculo, they see a beautiful thing that they've never seen before.
He's this other that they are planning to exploit, right from the second they meet him.
I don't really seem to pose a threat. They're immediately focused on taming me and capturing me and controlling it.
And monetizing.
Yes, and so then making money off of it.
We've tried to go at is the immediacy of the political situation, that they, especially Stephano, sees the monster and immediately decides what he's going to do. He's going to get him drunk. He's going to enslave him, and does it.
Like with Squantus.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's not much softness in the relationship at all.
Part of what's important about Caliban also is that he has a lot of knowledge about the island that no one else has.
Show me what you have that might be a valuable round. How about you?
You can map colonialism and the destruction of Native Americans very closely on this play, I think. I don't think there's any stretch about it at all.
Oh, the cow. I have to point out that when we filmed at the Plymouth Plantation, and it was actually a while ago, that supremely evil winter a few years ago, there was 6 feet of snow there, and it was, 12 or something. And so I remember somebody saying, no, we should come back when it's all green. And I said, no. We're talking about a winter that killed people. We don't want to show it pretty. We wanted to show it as bad as possible. And we're wearing, I'm wearing gaiters on my boots, and I've got five layers of wool on, and I walk past this cow who's just like hanging out there, and I don't know what he's eating, but we just had to we just added that clip just because it was so funny. But anyway, we were very lucky to get to the American Shakespeare Center, and to be able to talk to those guys, and Chris's reaction afterwards to the play was just his mind was blown, because he knew the history first, and a lot of people know the Shakespeare first, and they're able to kind of push it together. He did it the other way around, and was able to make these connections. He's like, this is the story of American colonialism. Just, it tracks perfectly.
Yeah. We do have another question from Barbara, and she said, I'll be on Nantucket in September. Can you do a pop-up drive-in there? Which we had talked about, and I don't know. You'll be the first to know, Barbara, if we can, but that was an idea that crossed our minds, and we were concerned that logistically it might not work out.
I mean, it's if it's possible. To be honest, this frame that we had to put together required us to buy 14 10-foot metal tubes, 1 inch in diameter, and then cut them up and put them together. So we're talking a 9x16 screen, which according to Jeff Bassett is half the size of the Chatham Orpheum's main screen. So it's a great big thing, but more importantly, when you break it down, it's a lot of carry-on baggage. But it could fit in the back of a truck, but it's still it's not something you can pack in.
Right. Let's see. Someone asked, do you think the coronavirus has brought you into some other place that you DOD? I don't know. I think the question, let's see. Oh, sorry. Do you think the coronavirus has brought you into some other place that you didn't think was going to happen?
Oh, as far as screenings are concerned, or as far as storyline?
They weren't clear, but I guess I guess the way I'd interpret this is what are the opportunities that have presented themselves?
Oh, it's interesting because one of the people that we interviewed is the head of the anthropology department at College of William and Mary, and they invited us to come down and do a screening. Yay! In September, they invited us back in March. So now, what it's allowing us to do is this: we are going to, at some point, go down there. I mean, we have the ability now to go places that we wouldn't normally, but not far from there is the Pamunkey Indian Reservation, which those are the descendants and the tribe of Pocahontas. Mm-hmm. And so I said, as long as we're going, we would go to the Folger Shakespeare Library. And as long as we would go to College of William and Mary, we're doing we offered a private screening to the Pamunkey because we were able to interview them and ask them, try to figure out what was going on with their people while Stephen Hopkins was in Jamestown. So in that sense, it is opening up some opportunities. And as the weather gets colder and people around here don't want to necessarily sit in their cars and watch a movie, we're looking to head south and probably do more stuff simply because it's just a thing. It's and it might as well be our thing versus somebody else. If we can show up and do something for one night and give people, an hour and a half, 2 hours of historical entertainment, then wonderful.
Yeah. One more question. I have a question, and then if I don't have another question, we'll wrap up. But this has really thrown a wrench in a lot of things. But if you could start another project, if you're thinking ahead, what do you think your next project might be?
Well, it's interesting because I really am looking forward to picking up the story of the Columbia expedition again, which brings us out to the Northwest coast, Hawaii, China, Japan, and the Philippines, and Indonesia. And so we'd love to be able to do that. Clearly, that's a bit problematic right now. Anything involving travel is a bit problematic right now. So there's that. But at the same time, I've been listening to, over the past few months now, the History of Byzantium podcast, history that I didn't know anything about at all, but it's like over 200 episodes. And I had to notice that on the map of the world where Americans are allowed to still travel to, Turkey is one of them. So holding out hope there, but the funny thing is that here I am listening to the podcast, and after the first couple hundred years, they're talking about Justinian's plague, and I'm going, oh no, tracking way too close there. So.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's a thought because I would love to go to Constantinople, mostly because they have really good food, and that's about half the reason that we're doing this anyway, is to go eat interesting food in different places.
Great. Well, I think we'll call it a night. Thank you so much, Andrew. And I'm looking forward to seeing the film in full form, maybe next summer or some point in the future when we can get you on that boat and over here in person.
Love that.
And we have a couple thank yous and a couple so interesting and fun. So thanks so much for spending your time with us, and good luck with your next projects. Stay well, and good luck with your drive-ins. That sounds exciting.
Thank you. Yeah, if anybody wants, they can go to the Hit and Run History page on Facebook and check our events, see if there's something that might be nearby. If not on the islands, somewhere closer to home. We're looking to bring it down Rhode Island, Connecticut, New York, that area. And so if anybody has ideas on bringing it to them, we're all ears. So anyway, thank you for the opportunity. This is great. Having a lot of fun.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. Good night. Good night, everyone. Thanks for coming.